Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Progressive Overload Podcast. Have you ever thought about strengthening multiple areas of your life at the same time? Then you've come to the right place. Our goal is to help you identify ways that you might need a progressive overload to push past those plateaus and keep you growing.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Progressive Overload Podcast. I'm Adam Lazarine. I'm joined here by Joe Copeland.
What's up?
And Dustin Moore.
Yo.
Hey, guys, it's episode 3, and we are so excited that you have joined us, and we cannot wait to get into this episode. What we're going to be talking about today are some of the dangers of restrictions and the preacher's kid mentality.
Wow.
What do you think
that is?
I don't know. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. But why don't we start out with telling the listeners about our weekends? I think there were some things that kind of went straight into what we have been talking about for the last couple of weeks and episodes, and it really hit us all in a different way. So, Joe, why don't you take it away?
So in our region, it was Snowmageddon, or should I say Ice-mageddon, and we were stuck in our houses, and we were faced with every behavior that we talked about in the last few episodes, and we faced a lot of challenges. You know, we came into this, we knew it was going to be snowy, we knew it was going to be icy, we were probably going to be buckled down for a couple days, but still, I was not prepared, and that's something we're going to talk about later. I didn't have the food I needed prepped. I didn't have those snacks that I like to go to available. And so, man, it was just tough. And so, I hate competitions like this so much, even though I'm responsible for putting them on every year for 7 years.
It's all your fault.
It's like, I feel like it's expected of me because people rely on it to lose their weight every year. But this is only the second time I've ever taken part in it, because I hate what it does to my mind, excuse me. So it makes me have this mentality where I'm either on or I'm off. And that's what we're going to talk about today is whether you're on plan or you're off plan, and the damaging mentalities that it has whenever you have that thinking going on. And so that's what happened to me, man. We went out to eat, go get some Mexican food. Finally, after ice settled down, we could kind of inch our way down the road. Trying to keep a toddler happy inside of a house for 3 days was a lot of fun. And so, at this specific restaurant, I have, a healthy option that I go to: chicken breast, sauteed veggies, some baked bean or charro beans, kind of one. And sure enough, my wife ordered some chips and queso.
Oh, devastation.
I know. And, the plan I'm following, all I'm doing is I'm just saying I'm not eating any processed carbs. And so there was a devil and an angel on both of my shoulders saying, these chips aren't processed carbs. You can eat these. These are fine. No, you can't. No, you can't. I was like, and then so the devil won.
Yeah, and you ate some chips and some queso.
A lot of queso, yeah.
And that was probably not the best choice. Not a devastating choice, but not the greatest choice.
No.
Yeah.
And
And so I beat myself up the rest of that day. I texted you guys. I was like, no, I failed you because I'm in these strict confines of our competition, and one of the rules was we do not cheat. And to me, that felt like a cheat. And fighting that mentality to not go get the Reese's Puffs on top of my fridge for my daughter and just eat 7 massive bowls of that, I had to fight that urge all night because I had the mindset, I stepped outside the bounds, why not do it again?
Yes.
That's the same thing we talked about.
right into what we just finished talking about. But it's so easy. But here's the flip side to that. You got on the scale this week and I
lost 2.2 pounds.
Yeah. So again, not the greatest healthy choice option.
Exactly.
But that did not have a negative impact on the scale.
Yes.
Now, for Dustin and I wish that we could say the same thing. We were in the same boat that you were. We were iced in, and of course, when you're in the house with your family, what do you want to do? You want to make cookies for the kids.
Yep.
You want to make something that tastes good and just it's comfort food because you're just there and you're binge watching TV or whatever. And so we did all of that, and I didn't really take part in much of what we'd made, and I felt like I was pretty good, but I think it was just maybe just the lack of activity and just general lethargic behavior. And then of course I did eat a little bit more than what I normally would.
Yeah.
And so it could have been just diet related. It could have been exercise related. It could have been a combination of all those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I actually gained weight this week, just so the listeners know that we are human, and we can actually experience what you guys may or may not be experiencing on the scale.
So true.
And so we want to empathize with you if that is the case, because you look at that scale and you realize you've put in work and significant work, and then you don't get the result on the scale. And what does that do to your headspace, Dustin?
Dude, it is a struggle, man. Like, our boats are a little different going into Ice-Mageddon. And I thought going into it that I had prepared myself adequately to be able to make it through and be fine, right? Like, I did prep. I prepped some taco meat out of lean turkey, right? Everybody's favorite meal in the world. It is what it is. And before I even went home, before I was iced in, I made sure I went in, hit the gym, and I got one last lift in before I got stuck. But being home alone, me and the four walls around me, boredom hit, and it hit quick. And dude, I found that I like to munch, especially when I'm bored.
Yeah,
right.
And for me, it wasn't so much that I ate poorly, right? Because I was eating what I would eat, but it was the quantity. It was the frequency with which I did it.
Yeah.
And I, looking back at it, I ate probably a little more than I have been going through this competition that we're in. But at the same time, the big difference was I wasn't getting that regular activity.
Yeah.
Well, I was I laid on the couch.
Probably got 1,000 steps each day.
Oh, if.
Yeah.
If.
Dang.
Well, and I think one of the things that we should remember is this far along in the competition, our bodies are starting to catch up with the idea that we're doing something different.
Yeah.
And our bodies are machines, and they are well-oiled machines because they will adjust quickly. And so you kind of have to throw a wrench in that system occasionally.
Yeah.
And so I think that's some of what we're dealing with. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, so the title of this episode is called The Preacher's Kid Mentality. And really, more than anything, it's just kind of a fun play on words, maybe. I'm not sure how to phrase that, but really what we're talking about is the binge and restriction behavior. So we restrict ourselves from whatever we decide to do, and whenever we put those strict confines on that, eventually you will stray outside those lines, and that's when the binging behavior comes in. You can't get enough of what you couldn't have previously, basically. So you get that tunnel vision whenever. So let's just use carbs, because that's one of the main things that people do. These last couple of years is carbs are from the devil, and that's the mentality a lot of people have. And so whenever we have a restriction placed on ourselves that we cannot have carbs, what it does is you get tunnel vision on those carbs, and all you can think about is, I can't have carbs. I want carbs. Look at that person over there. They're eating carbs.
Look at Joe at the restaurant eating chips.
I know. How dare him.
As a carbaholic.
Sinner.
Yeah.
I would have been offended being
I know.
that, Joe.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, that's okay. And so whenever we put these strict restrictions, that's a play on words there, it's called the scarcity mindset. So a scarcity mindset is just like what I said. It's when you get the tunnel vision of what you cannot have, and it's all you can focus on. And it makes, whenever we get tunnel vision, it makes impulse control very, very difficult. Yeah. Have you ever felt that whenever you're trying to follow a plan?
Yeah. Could you relate that to like going to the grocery store when you're hungry?
Oh, yeah.
Is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah.
Because you run into row and aisle after aisle of things that you restrict yourself from when you're dieting. If you put if you can, see me, if you're dieting, the air quotations when you're dieting, and then you go to the grocery store and you're like, I can't have that. I can't have that. I can't have that. I shouldn't have that. And then it runs into problems with when you run into the idea of getting outside of the boundary line, like we've been talking about. So what exactly, I guess the good question is, what exactly is the boundary, and is it the same for every person?
It just depends what you set for yourself. And, you know, if you're trying to stay within the confines of a ketogenic diet, I mean, you get 25 to 50 grams of carbohydrates a day. And so that's, I mean, if you eat vegetables, there's your carbs right there. And
Right.
so, and you know, for me, I'm just making the bounds of not eating processed carbs, like I said. So I can still eat potatoes and sweet potatoes and rice and quinoa and stuff like that. And so I did that for my own self, because I've done keto before and I've seen the binge and restrict behaviors come out of myself whenever I decide, oh, I'm not in ketosis, so I'm going to go eat some carbs while I'm not in ketosis. And so I just freaking binge the carbs. And so a binge is literally, it's a revolt that you, you know, upon the strict rules that you set for yourself, you decide, forget it, I'm done. I don't care about the rules anymore. Give me whatever carbs you got.
Yeah.
So if it's chips, you're shoving chips in your mouth. You're not even paying attention to the chip that you're chewing. You're paying attention on the next chip that you're about to grab, you know?
Yeah.
That's very true.
For me, like, it seems to be a recurring thing in my own personal journey. And I've kind of known this for a while. I've seen the evidence there. Saturdays are like binge days.
Oh,
Dude,
really?
that is when the cravings hit. That is when, if there is a slip, that's where it happens.
Yeah.
Like, it's always on the Saturday. Why? Because that's the day that I don't have anything to do.
Oh, yeah.
And
boredom.
you know, I stop keeping myself busy, and then I start thinking to myself, you know, maybe just this once,
Yeah.
right? I'll just let it go. I'll have a little snack, you know, and that snack becomes, well, maybe I'll have this with it. Well, I had that, you know, I've got time to work this off.
Yeah.
So as we're looking at some of these behaviors and the cycle that it creates,
Uh-huh.
does it? I found out for me that it's helpful whenever if I'm going to keep myself accountable with the scale, and that's not the end all be all thing to accountability, but it is one metric that we look at. I find it more helpful actually that we weigh in on Monday than on Thursday. You know, because if we did it on Thursday, then I'd have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In those days where I realize I'm going to be away from the scale for 6 whole days, and these first 3, I can really mess that up.
Yeah.
And still be okay because I can recover the last 4 days of the week.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like that is a cyclical behavior in and of itself.
It is, yeah.
And so what are some other metrics maybe that we should be looking at besides the scale?
Oh, I mean, you know, energy levels, how you feel. I mean, our body is really good at telling us how it feels if we can actually stop and be present and listen.
I found that out this morning.
Oh, yeah.
On the rower, no doubt. Dustin
Hey.
Dustin still owns the crown for best.
The crown has been reclaimed.
What is it, 2,500 meters?
2560?
2550, 2560. Okay,
Somewhere
I had
in
about
there.
800 left, and I just hit the wall, and my body told me, I'm not doing this today, and it was probably diet related.
Yeah.
Because burning energy in a different way through the diet that I'm on.
Exactly, yeah.
And the lifestyle that I'm choosing is hard sometimes.
Yeah, you don't have your glucose stores, if you're in ketosis, are completely depleted. So your body's having to take longer and work harder to convert those ketones to energy. And so that's why a lot of times when people are in ketosis, their workouts definitely suffer a little bit.
Okay, so how we feel is a great metric.
Yeah.
What about strength?
Strength is absolutely a metric, and it a lot of times it's one of the best metrics because it's a direct output of how our body's feeling. So if our body is depleted, like I was just saying, it needs nutrients. It's not gonna give you all of the strength that your body can have to lift the weight or whatever. And so that's a good one. I track circumference measurements on all my clients. I think circumference measurements are very important to track. So many times I'll have a client step on and not lose a single pound or ounce, and we'll do circumference measurements, and sure enough, they've lost a couple inches in their waist, a couple inches in their chest, maybe gained an inch in their biceps or whatever. And that happens all the time. And so that's another reason why I hate weight loss competitions, because they make you fixate on the scale.
And occasionally they end up being a square, but that's another story.
Oh, gosh. I think we need to explain that. So when I measured Dustin back in our last year, whenever he started, when I started coaching him, when I measured the chest, waist, and hips, he was the same measurement all the way around.
To the T.
Wow.
Exactly. And I think like the second time we measured it, it matched up too.
Yeah, it did. It matched like 2 or 3 times.
It was pretty
He was
consistent.
like, do you see that a lot? I was like, never. So,
Never. You're special. I know. Thanks.
so we have SpongeBob speaking on the podcast today.
That's
right?
it, dude. Just better looking and not as goofy.
It's more than the square pants, though. That's exciting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, something that you said a while ago, and you said on the weekends we tend to do the worst. We tend to have one of the most paradigm shifting moments that I've had in my education, or I think I actually heard in a podcast. You can consider that education. But somebody said on a podcast why they explained why are you eating the worst on days that you move the least. And if we think about the energy balance equation, calories in, calories out, are you burning more than you're intaking? Why are we going to eat the most on the days that we burn the least? Yeah. So if you want to have that cheat day or whatever, I hate that concept, but if you want to be a little bit more lenient or have that day,
that reward day,
sometimes people need that. Do that on the day that you're the most active or that you get the best workout in. That's totally unrelated, but I love that. And I tell all my clients that.
Can I give you guys the word that I use for those days?
Sure.
I use the word sanity days.
Hey,
because so much of what we're doing and so much of our weight and our body image and all the things, it's happening between our ears. And so those days for me are sanity days, and they probably are. That's probably the best way that I can justify having those, because I just need a little sanity.
Well, especially with keto, because it's so strict, you need some time, some real world food.
It is a battle, and you gotta have those pizza Fridays, dude.
You gotta have the pizza Fridays. Yep,
that's very true.
So number 2 that we kind of talk about, and all of these are related in some way. But the on and off mentality, whether we're on our diet or off our diet or whatever, it gives our mind a false hope that there is an end in sight.
Yeah, it's like I have that. If we think in terms of weight loss, right? I have that goal weight in mind.
Yeah.
And I hit it or I get close and I get excited and I'm like, all right, sweet, I'm here. And then I go right back to where I had been prior to losing that weight. Yeah. And it's like, wait,
it happens all the time.
I thought I was just at my goal weight, and now all of a sudden I'm not, because I didn't process mentally, hey, that wasn't a finish line.
No,
that was a starting line.
That was the beginning. Yeah,
exactly. I already have the podcast that comes out after this challenge is over is going to be called the 305 Day Challenge.
Hey,
I like that.
Yeah.
If you're doing the math at home, there's a 60-day challenge and 365 days in a year. So I'm just trying to help you out.
Yeah. Hopefully you didn't need help with that, but
hopefully.
So,
hopefully not.
When we have it in our mind that we only have to do this for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is, you go all out for those 90 days, and then you don't have a plan for after that. Like, what are you going to do after that? How are you going to maybe, I keep picking on keto because that's what I know, but, how are you going to transition maybe into a more balanced diet to where you're not going to gain all the weight back? Because I see that time and time again. Something really funny with my family. So my family, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer, pretty much all of them have done keto. And I remember Thanksgiving, maybe two or 3 years ago, my brother texted in our family group. He was like, "Hey, is this Thanksgiving BYOC?" He's like, "Is it bring your own carbs?" Right. Yeah. And so, or maybe we would go over to a family gathering or maybe for a weekend and hang out. And the question was, "Hey, are you on or are you off? Are you on keto or are you off keto? What do you want? How do you want to eat?" And it was just this conversation between us. And and we were all fine with it. And it's just it's such a bad mentality to have.
Well, it's funny because it's pervasive in not just your family. It's every, and particularly, we may get to this in a little bit, but particularly for church functions, you think about, there's always going to be somebody that's going to bring a salad because they're dieting. There's my air quotes again.
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody that brings just comfort food because that's what they're good at making. Potluck meals are just kind of a hodgepodge of food, and you just get to pick through, and you're going to be tempted in a lot of different ways. But that mentality, that on-off mentality, is just so pervasive in our culture and in all of our families. And so I think that's why we're trying to get this episode in, because it's a real problem. It's a real issue for people.
It is. I've walked through that, following through with restrictions that I have on myself as a part of my programs in past. We'd have those church functions, right, where there would be plenty to eat from, and there would be salads because, there's that person that wants to be healthy, right? And Dustin's in the kitchen heating up the lunch that he brought with him from his prepped meals because it's measured out and he knows what's in it,
right?
For his program, and so everybody's making their plate at the potluck, and I just make my way all the way into the kitchen, heat up my lunch, and come out with my little Tupperware container.
And everybody else has piles of food on a 3-container plate.
And the person next to me has that like mile-high stack of food and says, "Hey, good for you."
Right.
Yeah, good for you.
That's me when I'm off.
Right.
I mean, that's why I've really enjoyed this last section or session of going back on trying to lose weight, is because I chose a much more balanced way. I don't feel depleted. I don't feel like I'm losing out on any sort of food category. And that's what restrictions do. Is a lot of diets out there restrict a certain food group, and I do not believe that is the best way for us to eat long term.
Right.
You can use tools like keto and stuff like that to like jumpstart a weight loss plan, like Adam's doing, but eventually he is going to go off, and so you really need to think about how you plan on rolling yourself back into a more balanced diet. And once you do that, once you start eating just whole foods and not staying away from the processed crap, at that point, all you have to worry about is, am I eating too many calories? That's really all I have to worry about.
Right. Well, and I think in all of that conversation, we're eliminating the word end, because then there's not, it's just more about balance. It's more about finding your level of homeostasis, and we can talk about that in another episode. But it's all about just recreating that word for you so that it's a continuous process.
Yeah.
And as we're talking through those things, as we approach our lives, if we put that end in sight, if we act as if we have just described, it leads to such a poor relationship with the food that we are taking in.
Absolutely.
The way that we approach food becomes drastically altered for the duration of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we miss out that eventually we'll go back to being that off status, right?
Yeah.
And we don't think about our interactions with it then. Like we almost put it in perspective of, it'll be okay to have those things again in the quantity that I'm craving.
Yeah.
But I just have to wait till this mark. Right. And that's such a bad way to look at it.
Right. And I want you guys to think about the first time that you really turned over the back of a carton of something and looked at the macros and the nutrition facts. What was the very first time? Okay. Not recently, but like the very first time that you realized, say for a package of saltine crackers, that a serving size was 5 instead of 3/4 of the sleeve,
Yeah.
And then you realize just how much you're putting into your body. And if you've never done that, if you've never looked at the nutrition facts or the macros of any food, I'd encourage you to try that and get a little education on what you're looking at. Maybe ask one of us a question, is this something good that I should be looking at in the macros?
Yeah.
And when we're talking about macros, Joe, what are macros? Because I don't.
So your macronutrients are your fats, carbs, and proteins. And so whenever somebody says that they're counting macros, they likely got a coach or an online calculator that tells them this is how many carbs, this is how many grams of carbs you need, how many grams of fat, how many grams of protein. And so that that's a great way to track. I like tracking macros versus calories. But yeah, that's macronutrients.
I remember walking through the store and seeing some of like the household staples that I grew up with, and this was around the first time that I really started to look into what macros were. Before it was like, oh, I like this, so I'm gonna put it in my cart at the store, right? And I went through and all those staples, those things that were just you had to have these around the house, or the house was not stocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned that box over and I looked at the back and went, oh, huh. Maybe that's why I had the problem that I had to begin with. And I started to put those things back on the shelf and was like, okay, what can I shift to?
Well, and it also becomes, if you're I don't know, I always say that men, like, and we are men at this table, men are foragers. And so if you send us to the store with a list, let me explain that. If I get sent into the store with a list of 5 things, I'm going to come out with 6.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've got to search and gather and find something else that I didn't know that I needed. But when you talk about relationship with food and how it relates to the end of your goal and where you want to be in your fitness level, then you have to decide, when I'm going to get something that's not on the list, I really have to pay attention to the relationship with that item.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good point.
So with that in mind, what can we do? What do you think, Joe? What are some ways that we can put into practice developing a better relationship with food, walking forward without that end in sight mentality, avoiding that binge purge behavior that we talked about, that scarcity mindset? What are some practical ways that we can implement those kinds of things into our life?
Yeah. So first off, I'd like to start. If you suffer with clinical bulimia nervosa or anorexia, please go see a psychologist or a counselor and really talk those issues out. And so when we're talking about binging and restricting, we're not talking about the clinical sense, but we are talking about behaviors that the everyday average
That's
people
a good point.
see.
Yeah.
But as far as if you see yourself becoming that person that catches yourself binging, eating instead of just a handful of chips, you're downing the whole bag. Like I said, thinking about the next bite before you're even done chewing the first bite. Eating not just a couple cookies, but you end up downing the whole sleeve of cookies. Eating until you feel miserable. A lot of times that's kind of what the binge ends up looking like, to where you just feel sick. If you find yourself in that place, the worst thing you want to do is shame yourself for it. So usually these binge attitudes come from a feeling of depression or anxiety or boredom or aloneness. And so the last thing we want to do is layer on more negative feelings on top of that, or else you're just going to create a cycle of that happening again. So like we said in the last podcast, have grace on yourself, and there's nothing you can do but just pick yourself back up and start over fresh on a new day.
Right. And one of the things that's huge about that is to create gratitude for what we can eat.
Yes.
And I feel like I know for me, I get a big kick out of doing food prep. And I didn't know I'd enjoy it so much, and maybe it's just how I cook it, or for you at home, if you're listening, maybe you have a certain thing that you like to cook on, or a griddle or a grill or something. Find that avenue and that niche for you that works. And so when you have to make food, and when you get to make food, it's not an opportunity of saying, this is not what I can't have. It's an opportunity of, this is what I get to create. And then you get to enjoy your meal from start to finish. And
That's
then
great.
You have so much more to add to it.
That's great. Kind of what really hurt us in this ice storm was the fact that most of us were not planned. We didn't plan well. And so that's another way that you can really keep yourself from getting this behavior is plan.
That is so good for me. I am a planner. I'm a details guy. I love to work out the little tiny details of everything that I do, and I think that's definitely one thing that has shifted as I've seen myself progress, but is not perfect. Definitely need work.
For sure. And so, like we said in the first episode, if you struggle with binging, be very, very careful and be very plan out what kind of foods you keep in your house. If it's the cookies, get those the heck out of your house.
Yeah.
You know, make yourself, like we said, make yourself get in your car and drive down the road and do it. Put those obstacles in place of that binging behavior.
Right. And find some people that you can walk with the journey on the
Yeah.
journey, because
Accountability.
it does matter. You know, if I know I'm going to have to report to you guys my food prep, I don't have to, but we're choosing to
Yeah.
a lot of days. It does make a difference in what I cook and what I choose to pull out of the freezer or the refrigerator,
Yeah.
or what I choose to even buy at the grocery store. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. And you know, we talked about this exact thing before we started recording, right? We were talking about our weekend and the struggle. And for me, there was that struggle where, you know, I gained like 0.4 pounds this week, right? Like, you know, for most people, they're like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
But for me, like, I got mad at myself, right? I got upset. And so I told these guys when I left the gym after weighing in, one of the first things that I did is I texted a group chat of guys that I'm in a small group with that we meet weekly and hang out and talk and communicate regularly. And I was like, all right, guys, look, here's the deal. I'm struggling with this mentally. It's hurting me right now. I need accountability. Hold me to it. And so now, like, every time I've eaten anything since then, I've sent a picture of it to this group chat. And like, this is what I'm putting in my body. Hold me to it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The accountability is so necessary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. So as we make the transition here, let's talk a little bit about this preacher kid mentality and what that is, and I think I can kind of take a stab at it. You guys can help me out, but as we talk about that, you may have experienced a PK, a preacher's kid, and it is to some people on the outside looking in, it is a life of restriction. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't be a part of this group. I can't go to that thing. I can't do that function. And then whenever they get free from their parents, what happens? You know, they go crazy in a certain sense of the word. They binge. Yeah, it is a revolt. Is Joe's word.
Exactly. Yeah.
They revolt against the behavior, and then we all know what comes after that. You know, they end up in situations and behaviors that are not conducive to a good lifestyle.
Yeah.
Period. And so that's kind of what we're talking about as we make the shift here, and we're trying to think about things that Christians can or cannot do. And I think that's where even in that question, it becomes a list of to do and not to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of unhealthy at the beginning, at the front end of that.
Absolutely.
So what do you guys have as far as an experience with that, being in the church and being, Joe?
Yeah, I just think about, you know, my high school days and, you know, trying to get my friends to come to church with us and stuff like that. And you know, a very common answer that I would get from friends that I invite to church are like, no, I can't go to church because then I can't go to the party on Saturday, or I can't go do this, and I can't cuss, and I can't do this. Why would I want to be a Christian, you know?
Right.
Yeah, you know, for me, it kind of extends into many different areas. I've seen it with friends. I've seen it with family where, you know, they grow up in church. You know, I've had people that I genuinely looked up to, right, and saw as somebody that was more mature and further along in their faith than myself as a young man in high school. And then they get free, like you said, right? They get away from the controlled circumstances that they were in. The world starts to be apparent and right in front of them, and slowly, one by one, they like walked off the cliff. And it was so, I remember it being so upsetting to see that happen and just be like, man, like what changed? But yes, it is something that is real. People do struggle with. In more senses than we can really begin to fathom, but yeah, it's something that's so prevalent.
Well, and that's the thing is, it's not just preachers' kids. It's not just
No.
because I'm a pastor. It's not just my kids that have to deal with this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like what do we say to someone that deals with that? And I feel like it has to start with that whole cycle that we just talked about with food, of guilt and shame, and because you guys both mentioned, you know, here's the thing that I can't do, and instead of focusing on what we get to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a good place to start with that. because we can have that scarcity mindset like we have with food. We can have it with our faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just look back at, I've been in Christian circles or groups of friends that are all believers and we all keep accountable, and not a single one of those times did we have to have alcohol to have fun, or did we have to go to a party to have fun. We spent, like in high school, we spent every Friday and Saturday night in our church youth room playing Xbox with our youth pastor, and it was the best memories I've ever had from childhood. And so many people didn't want to do that because they were at the party the other night. Or I keep going to high school. I'm freaking 32, but 30. I'm 30.
It's okay. It was like yesterday.
I peaked in high school.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, that's just terrible. Well, I feel like as we talk about this as well, so much of this behavior that comes out of restriction in our faith has to do with we feel like we have arrived spiritually. Yeah. That if we have arrived at this point, we shouldn't have to deal with this. And that's really not a good place to be, because even if you are the most fit person in the world, or fit person that walks into the gym, you still have to deal with X, Y, and Z that everyone else in that gym and everyone else in that church and everyone else in that building has to deal with. And so just because it goes back to that word end, and we have to try to figure out a way to eliminate the end, because in our faith and in our life, end is death. Yeah. It's born this date, end this date, separated by one line in between.
That's the only time Jesus will ever say, okay, you can stop pursuing me now, is when you die.
Right. Right. And that's the thing. It's about pursuit, and that's a great word. Yeah. Pursuit. Love that. And what are we pursuing? Is it food? Is it Christ? Is it something in between? Yeah. Is it family? And there's a lot of things that we can
always something.
Yeah, we can put a lot of things into that blank and make them idols and end up worshiping them. Is it sports? Is it following our kids with their sports? I mean, that's huge in our culture.
True.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be there and support your kids, but I have seen so many people and so many families and so many things happen because you put that into a status and put it on a pedestal where it should not be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we have to be careful with that.
Yeah, it's that idea, just like we talked about. You're not hitting that end point, you're hitting the start line, right? Because the race has just begun. And we're called to run our race, right? Yeah. And for ourselves, like, we can talk about this idea, and so many people see Christianity or following Jesus as being restrictive, but the message of the gospel is one of freedom. Yeah. Truly.
Very good.
Absolutely.
It may not be the world's sense of freedom, if you want to spin it that way, but the truth to be shown is a message of freedom. Yeah, and so good. As we walk through our faith journey, like we walk through our health journey, it is a process. It is that process of sanctification, the continuing work that is done in our lives, that we continue to see fruits and evidence made apparent. Yep. Right?
Right. And as we talk about sanctification, it's setting something apart. I'm going to set it apart for this reason. And through Christ and what he did in that moment in history on the cross, if we say yes and we follow him, we are set free from every sin in that moment. And so we are positionally set apart already. Yeah. But we still have to deal with X, Y, and Z. It doesn't mean that we are immune from it. Doesn't mean it stops. It doesn't mean our journey ends, because there's that word again, until we draw our last breath. And so it's a positional thing, but we still, and just like all of us at this table, and please do not misunderstand, we all still sin. We all still deal with sin. We all still deal with the things of the flesh. Yeah. And True. I say that in the way of flesh versus spirit. We all have struggles that we deal with. And so if you're listening and you say, well, these guys just have it all figured out, we do not.
Absolutely not.
We do not.
Yeah. That was great. Man,
Man, you know, the this idea of the preacher's kid idea, right? And maybe Adam, maybe you can hit on this a little bit because you are the preacher with kids, right?
I am.
But do you see any correlation between creating strict rules for our kids and them erupting someday and deciding to just go crazy, right?
I think in the way that you think correlation, I think it depends on how severe the rules are.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because just like in our diets, or in our eating plans and our lifestyles, if we choose to completely get rid of something, then we're always going to want that something.
yeah.
And I feel like in the preacher kid mentality, it is all about what we just talked about with our food. It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Yes, we are hard on our kids. Yes, there are some things that we expect from them because not only do we want them to follow scriptural beliefs and follow Jesus, and they have in their own time made that decision to follow Jesus because we're believers all the same in our household. And so there are some things that we expect from them, but we also understand that there are going to be momentary failures that come, and there is grace to be had in those moments. But there's also still maybe not a punishment, that's a bad word, but gosh, I can't even think of the word.
Yeah.
There's a price to be paid for the decisions that you make.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And just like in our food and our eating and our workouts, there's going to be a price to be paid for what we choose to do or choose not to do.
Yeah.
And so I've seen kids that erupt. I've seen preachers' kids that go off and erupt like a volcano because they have been bottled up and capped up, and the rules were so strict, and they just wanted to get away. They wanted to revolt and rebel. And so I feel like it can happen, but we try hard in our home to make balance.
Yeah.
And my wife and I do a really good job of, if one of us is frustrated, the other one's usually calm, and it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So,
well, you said the word punishment. I think what's more important than how strict the rules are is how the parents treat the kids after they mess up. If they are shamed, like we talked about, if after they messed up, if they are shamed and ridiculed and made and brought to nothing, the chances are that they have higher chances of revolting at that point.
That's very true. Yeah, and I have often had to go to my children and say, look, I blew it. I really I could have parented you differently in that moment. And it's hard to do because you're supposed to be the parent. You're supposed to have all the answers. You're supposed to have, of course, the world says that. Yeah. But I want my children to understand that I can fail them just as easily as they can fail me. Mm-hmm. I think that's huge for their development. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, Dustin, you seem really good at the whole wrap up thing in the last couple episodes. So why don't you just give us a quick synopsis?
All right. So
we'll move on.
Today, the preacher's kid mentality. We've updated you on our personal walks and shown you that yes, we mess up too, and that's okay. Not only this, but we talked about even our own personal struggles as we go through this on and off, this binge and purge behavior, having this mindset that is so set on scarcity and focused in that sense. We've talked about struggling with looking at things with this, there's an end goal. If I can just reach that end goal, everything will be golden and life can go back to the hunky-dory way that I want it to be, even though that's not really true. We've talked about how when we restrict ourselves so heavily, we can lead to having a poor relationship with our food. So remember, in order to combat that, practice gratitude. Be grateful for what you have as you eat. Plan. Set a plan, stick to it. Take it a day at a time. The slow approach is the best approach. You don't have to get everything done within a day. And then in regards to our faith, remember, it's not about that scarcity mindset of I can't do these things, it's not those rules that are being imposed on us. Remember, the gospel is a message of freedom. Our walk with Christ does not have an end until we die. We are committed until then. Until then, we are walking through this process of sanctification to be made holy and to be continually pushed to be more like Christ. And then lastly, the idea of the preacher's kid and all the rules making them blow up. That's, many people talk about that. Not necessarily true. We can see from experience from someone walking through this that our approach and how we handle things can oftentimes make a world of a difference. Yep. And so, as we are signing off, remember, follow us on all our social medias to stay up to date with our personal journeys, where we are going through what our workouts are looking like, making sure that we are being held accountable by you, the listener. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with us. And then you can listen to our podcasts on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and now on Google Podcasts. We are on multiple platforms. There are many different ways that you can connect and share with your peers. So please share these episodes, share these recordings, and we look forward to hearing some feedback from you.
That's right. And if you haven't already, shoot us a question. We'd love to answer any questions you might have. We'd love to get some feedback, and if we can work it into an episode, we'd love to be able to do that. So until the next time, everybody, thanks for listening.